Sawabona family, so much has happened since the last time we saw you, but we're excited to be back with you. Today in the classroom, we will be unpacking what it looks like to turn pushback into progress.
We have an amazing guest, and she's really going to be able to set the stage for the rest of our season. Can you believe that? We are in season 2. So stay tuned because the Critically Conscious Classroom is next.
Microphone check 1 2 1 2. Welcome to the Critically Conscious Classroom. I am one of your co-hosts, ACSA Director of DEI, Anthony Robinson.
And I'm your other co-host, ACSA Senior Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Professional Learning Services, Dr. Tracie Noriega. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2. This is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
In many, many ways. Did you get some rest this summer, future Dr. Robinson?
No, I didn't really get too much rest, but before I talk about that, I do want to say this. So the first time we said, it's the first day of class, season 1, I was screaming in the mic. We had some tech issues. So the prayer for today is, one, I do commit to not yelling in the microphone today, but also we're praying that we don't have any tech issues. But to answer your question, Dr. Noriega, it was a restful summer, but I didn't get a whole lot of rest. And part of that is I want to give a quick shout out, to my kids. So today is my son Kyle's first day of 7th grade. Yesterday was my daughter London's first day of high school. So I had a lot of sleepless nights, right? It's a happy moment, right? To think about specifically my daughter transitioning from middle school to high school, but also at the same time, I had to come to grips with the fact that she's almost an adult. And it's always exciting as an educator to welcome the new students in and the students that we knew in the past to see them grow up. But as a father, like I'd say that was a tough one. But I'm really excited about it. So congratulations to them. Congratulations to all of our educators that are watching us right now. If today is your first day of school, if you started a week ago, this week, if you start next week, whenever you start, we just want to say happy first day of school. But Dr. Noriega, 1, did you get to rest? And 2, when we left off on season 1, we had a beautiful gift coming. So we want to hear from you. Did that gift arrive? And then also, how was your rest this summer?
Yes, we know that there's a lot of definitions, many definitions of rest. So I did get some rest in many ways. And to answer the second part of your question, I had a little gift coming. She actually came 3 weeks early. So I don't know if you can see this, but that is my granddaughter, Jade Renee Noriega Stone. Renee, after my husband, because my daughter's a daddy's girl, but that's all good. And she turned 1 month yesterday. We are just absolutely loving being grandparents. It's a whole different kind of love. So thanks to everyone for all of the messages and the well wishes. My daughter would be starting school too, but she's taken a little bit more time. She's actually a 6th grade teacher in Southern California. So spending time with this gorgeous grandbaby of mine is definitely my new form of rest.
And I would say too, isn't it such a beautiful thing to see the circle of life, right? Not only through the lens of being a parent or a grandparent, but through the lens of being an educator, right? And it's that reminder. So typically, I don't know what you all can see. I'm trying to move around so you can see my photos, but typically I make sure I'm swapping books out, right? The different books that represent our topics. But today I have photos of my children. So the photos behind me, it's a photo of my daughter's first day of preschool, my son's first day of preschool as well. And then it's a picture of them both in elementary school. I think my son was in kinder and my daughter was in 2nd grade. That's the reason why we do this thing, right? We do this work for my babies and your babies and our babies and our community babies, all of the children that we serve. So, and I can't wait to see what the future holds, not just for my kids, but little Jade, Renee. So again, congratulations, Dr. Noriega. Congratulations to my brother, Renee, and to your entire family.
Thank you. Thank you. And I absolutely agree with you. We do this work for a reason, right?
Yeah.
We want to be able to see changes in our lifetime, right? I definitely want to help to make this world a better place. And I absolutely believe that we're in the right place doing just that.
Absolutely. Now, in order to understand those changes and what those changes look like, I think sometimes, we do have to look back. History is very important because having an understanding of history lets us know how to properly move forward, especially, for you and I as DEI practitioners, as the leaders of this work for ACSA. It's very important for us to understand what happened before us, but also to get a lens of what's being done now. And so today we have such a special guest. We have Nicole Anderson here with us. And I know many of you all watching know who Nicole is. And when I speak of Nicole, I often say she's the reason that I can kind of walk. She crawled, she rolled around on the ground, she did all the various things so that we could get some type of movements in this work. So we do want to go ahead and bring Nicole on stage so we can get this conversation going.
Hi, Nicole.
Hello. My
Welcome.
family. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Well, as Anthony said, it's super important for us to look back, right, in order to move forward. Every culture actually has a saying that speaks to that, right? In Filipino American studies, we use a quote that actually comes from what Dr. Jose Rizal said a number of years ago during the Spanish-American War, actually the Philippine-American War, when the Philippines was trying to gain independence. But essentially, it's something like no history, no self, right? KNOW, or no history, no self, NO. So it just means you have to be able to look back to look forward. And as Anthony said, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you and all the work that you did for ACSA with ACSA members. So we wanted to get you on the show to talk about, what you have seen in your position prior as the equity executive. Actually, I think it was a longer title, right? The equity, diversity, and equal access executive. Having supported our members through the years in different capacities, and then seeing us in these positions now, we really just wanted to break it down with you and hopefully provide some inspiration for our leaders out there, and also confront the opposition that continues to exist.
No, I appreciate you having me in this space. It's very surreal, and so thank you. Hopefully, I hold back my tears today. But I will say, just kind of, shout out, of course, in the chat. I can already see the Morehouse and Clark shout out. So I have to say, the part of my emotions right in this moment, I'm joining you from Atlanta, Georgia, where my husband and I have had the distinct pleasure of moving our son, DJ Anderson, into Morehouse College. We also are parents of Clark Atlanta as well, our daughter, who I'm actually sitting in her apartment. So you have to see this very different background than what I normally have on our Zoom screens, right? But sitting in her apartment, she's a senior at Clark Atlanta. So we're having just a very surreal experience, and what a connection to just being in this moment of history. Because as we all know, historically, Black colleges and universities have done such amazing things for our educators, our students, you name it. So I'm just honored to be in this space right now. And just thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
I was going to say something, but I'll say that offline. But I do want people to see the hoodie a little bit more.
Yes,
so I want to shout out really quick, and we'll
I know Morehouse, man. I gotta say,
we'll move on to the questions. So I'm a Morehouse man. I'm very excited to see that hoodie. I also want to give a shout out to Gerald Luke. I saw that you said that you are a Clark Atlanta dad. Yes, shout out to the entire AUC, which is the Atlanta University Center. But let's go ahead and jump into these questions, Nicole. Again, I talked a little bit about history. So we'll start there and then we'll move on to what you're doing currently and what's going on in the world and how your work has been shaped and impacted through that. So I wanted to start us here, Nicole. So when you began the equity work here at ACSA, what were the challenges at the time and what were administrators asking you for specifically?
Yeah, interesting. Well, what's interesting is I had the distinct pleasure of starting my work with ACSA before being a staff member. I was a member out of Vallejo City Unified School District, and I started as a teacher, ironically, at a high school named after my grandfather, Jesse Bethel High School. So shout out to the Jags. And then I had the opportunity to go into administration pretty early. And in that space, what's interesting is that I recall there was this natural, intrinsic kind of passion for doing educational equity work, which is simply just, giving kids what they need, when they need it, how they need it. And I think of, Dr. Jeff Duncan Andrade, who has been one that inspired me in my work early on. And I remember sitting in spaces, listening to him talk, right, at conferences, you name it. But I also recall at the time, there was kind of an innocent yet, I would say, passionate and intentional need for the work. And when going into ACSA, I was actually an assistant principal and I was a member and I became active and wanted to really give more professional learning. One of my colleagues said, hey, you need to be more active in ACSA. So then I started being on the committees and that's where this equity work really started. Shout out to the EADS committee statewide. I got a chance to be the chairperson. Dr. Patricia Brant-Senko is, I think, holding that role right now and continues that work in that space as a member. But what was really awesome is getting into the ACSA space. I recall the challenge was more about the awareness of what equity work was. And so I had the distinct pleasure of joining ACSA in 2014 as a staff member. And I had the very first position, which I often laugh with people about that, because ultimately, when I think about the first, right, that is a challenge in itself. People aren't even aware of what this work is. What does that mean when we say we have a diversity and executive equal access? It was such a long name. People couldn't even introduce me right. But literally, what did it mean? We had to define the work. That was the challenge. It was about awareness. It was about, am I supposed to be uncomfortable? Am I not? Like, this is not necessarily the fabric of our association, but yet it's the work of leaders, as we know. And what I loved about ACSA is, what do we say? Leadership matters. And so when I think about the challenges at the time, there was a lot of awareness building. People just wondering, like, understanding there's equity gaps, right? And there are persistent equity gaps. And there's a history of public education where there are students who we, at the time had fancy words, right, that we see now in the California data dashboard that we talked about. How do we close these disproportionality gaps, these opportunity gaps, access gaps? We had all kinds of names, but these were things people weren't aware of. So the big challenge was building a foundation for people to be aware that, yes, we champion public education as an association, but we also have data for historically marginalized students that continue to be predictable, that continue to show up every year. We have work to do. So I would say that was the biggest challenge, which then, of course, sparked, okay, what is the challenge for us at ACSA, right? What do we do to build upon the need to build awareness? And so I'll share a little bit about that, but I think of the challenges at the time was awareness, definitely, which looks very different now.
Right.
Can you say more about that, Nicole?
Yeah.
What is, again, you've been supporting, you continue to support our members, you support school board members, and teachers, educators across the board. So 9 years ago or so, right? 10 years ago or so, you talked about it was awareness. And I still think that we have work to do on that end, but can you speak to what you see now? What are the things that you've been supporting our members on
Yeah, good question. Well, what's so exciting about, the awareness building was how do you now create some services to provide people with the support? Because I truly believe that part of the challenge for our leaders is that we sometimes want to hold ourselves accountable for things we don't really understand or aware of. And yet we are responsible for our students. And so I think being helpful with the support. So the academies, right? That was a huge piece of the work, is creating what we call equity leaders academies. And so shout out to all who are part of those academies across the state. That was definitely like a baby that was, had to be born into the space of ACSA, because we traditionally didn't have positions like I had. The positions you all have, those are all positions. A lot of districts have those now. So having an equity leaders academy was one way. One thing that was really interesting, you think about the challenges at the time, was also an awareness about the pipeline to becoming an administrator and also becoming a superintendent. So I remember, shout out to Margie Cuisin, who was my very first boss at ACSA, and I was in member services. And one of the things that people became aware of was the data around who has access to this pipeline, to this leadership roles, and also the representation of our leaders in comparison to the students they were serving. And so one of the things that I think was super important, again, I just really appreciate the work that Margie supported, because it was very new. And part of it was creating networks, right? We had these diverse networks that created space for some of our marginalized members, who didn't have necessarily access to interact with each other, nor for our members to be aware of what their experiences were. So we had an LGBTQ network, we had our African American administrators network, we had our Latino administrators network, we had our Asian Pacific Islander network. And what was beautiful is that it created a space for us to now have voices to share what some of those needs were. When I think about now, what does that mean now? So I get the opportunity to do a lot of support, in particular coaching, training, board observations, supporting superintendent searches. Those are all things I get a chance to be in the trenches with. So when I think back to the challenges at ACSA, one of the things that was really eye-opening was the person who's going to lead our districts, called our superintendents, right? Those were ones who we didn't necessarily have a pipeline to build for those that may have been women or people of color. And so having groups like CASA be in the space, right, to be able to engage with, hey, here's awareness about, at the time, there were 30 African-American superintendents, I think. And that was like a record at the time, right? And so getting this opportunity to now be a part of a search process where the networks we created in ACSA were also the space where now the superintendent search process became much more rich, because now our search consultants, whether it was, all the different search firms that exist, they all now have more access to information to now open the door for those that may have not had that opportunity. That was a huge, huge step. And we still have a lot of work to be done, but these are all amazing leaders who are not only, were the best candidates to get these jobs, but also they're still sustaining those roles. And what I really appreciate is in all of that, these were all equity leaders. These were folks who championed the work around, let's make sure that all of our students get what they need, because equity applied to all of the kids in the districts. But ultimately, how do we close those gaps? And so I really appreciate that opportunity. And school boards all over the state are engaging in important work, not just around hiring new superintendents, but also in effective governance work, because as you know, policy matters when it comes to equity work as well. So just, huge experience that ACSA laid a lot of a foundation for. And of course, we have a lot of work to be done, because, going to the essence of the pushback conversation, I understand that there is a lot of work politically that does impact some of the work that we've been doing and what we need to do.
It's interesting you mentioned the Equity Leaders Academy or Equity Administrators Academy, because to be honest, Nicole, that academy is in jeopardy. We usually fill up all the spots. I know we've gone from, 2 cohorts to, to 1 last year. The directors of the academy are amazing educators and leaders, Dr. Sharina Betters and Dr. Marcy Poole.
Yep.
But we know that there's a number of different reasons, right? Yeah. Variables. Districts use Title II dollars. Folks are reticent to spend their money on something that says equity, right? I know that with California budget cuts, a lot of times professional development is the place to cut, right? Farthest away from the classroom. And then that means that folks have to pay out of pocket.
Right.
So we're working really hard to make sure that folks show up to something that is very, very special, like you said, near and dear to your heart. And I feel like it's one of those mainstays that we need to continue to fight for. Yeah. And I hope people can see that it's an invaluable resource, right? It's a network in itself.
Absolutely.
To where you are in community with folks that are doing the work, regardless of what position you're in. And I think that's a little bit different for this particular academy, because it's not necessarily what people might call a job alike, right? Like you're right. How many years ago, districts started taking the equity off of their title.
Right.
Yeah.
But here at ACSA, you'll be happy to know that we have a number of networks still in place.
Absolutely.
So while we have our sister affinity organizations here at ACSA, we sponsor networks. We continue the LGBTQ plus network,
yeah.
right? And then of course that feeds into our Lead with Pride conference.
Yes.
There are still a number of administrators who have equity or diversity or belonging in their titles. So there's a network for them to get together. So we do that much more informally. We have our Arab American Administrators Network. They named it Arabiya. Our Pacifica administrators, and I think there's only like maybe 30 across the state on our ACSA list.
Yes.
So if you're not an ACSA member and you are of Pacifica descent and you're an educator, let me know, because we want to make sure that we have this community for you.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, I just want to throw out that we have our Invisible and Visible Disabilities Network, and that is specifically for our administrators that have these specific pieces of their identity themselves, right? It's both. It's a way to support students, but it's also a way to support ourselves, in the space. So I feel like we've evolved in some ways, right?
Yeah, super exciting.
Started.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what's powerful, when I think about what you mentioned, the budget cuts and some of the mental models that have shifted. Like when I started at ACSA, there was an appetite, even though there was some challenges, but there was an appetite to do this work. And I would say even when George Floyd was murdered and we dealt with just a huge push and kind of swing towards anti-racism work. We talked about like this work, we had resolutions, we had all these DEI positions pop up, we had all this funding and grants and all these things. And all of a sudden now those things look very different. And I always want to remind people, this is super important, especially as equity leaders, that we stay grounded in our core values. And as often we say to leaders, where you have your budget is where your values are. So I want to say that again, where your budget is focused and you're allocating resources, that's where your core values sit. It doesn't matter what organization, what position, that remains the same. And so I think that's the first thing we have to think of is, what are our core values? And not get too caught on names and is it equity, is it this? Because the reality is it's about the work, right? And so I don't spend a lot of time fussing with people about the name. If equity is like a curse word to you, I'm going to stop cussing you out, period. Right. We're going to use a word that helps you understand the work, because honestly, we all know this as equity leaders. The word is not the issue, right? It's the politics that have been created around it, which is the history of our nation. And we have to be very clear without getting caught in politics. We have to know our history to know where we're going. And so to understand these ebbs and flows in public education, we've seen this before. For those that have been familiar with the National Equity Project's work around the history of public education from 1647 all the way to now, literally you've seen these same types of flows in education. You've seen it in many spaces, because historically when people have been marginalized and there's an advancement, there's always going to be pushback. And that pushback, we got to sit in that space. Why is there pushback? Well, one is we have mental models, right, that are in this space, and people unfortunately feel threatened. So what is our job as equity leaders? Do we get caught in the politics? Do we get caught in the emotions? Or do we get caught in doing the work based on strategy, which is meet people where they are? Because the reality is people don't know. I'm going to go back to the original challenge. They weren't aware. So what do you have also? You have narratives, right? So those same narratives, interesting, that the same people that I've watched do this work and champion the work, now we're afraid. It's because the narrative has gone larger than the narrative that we often have now become silent. And so as leaders, I challenge us always, and this, I'm speaking to myself, so I want to be clear that it's real, as a woman of color, as a Black woman, right? I understand, right, that leading equity work is not easy, but I've always said we have to be strategic. And if we're going to lead this work, we got to recognize right now is a time to be strategic, and not in a way that is manipulative. It's not in a way that's not being true to our core values. It's in a way of loving those, and especially our ACSA family, who are in the space where they need support, but they just may not know how to connect to this work. And the word equity may cause confusion. It causes fear. So then as leaders, maybe that's a word that we need to rethink while still doing the work, because the work hasn't changed. I haven't met a person on this planet who doesn't love their kid, their child, and want the best for them, right? I don't care what color they are, what language they speak, who they voted for. People want what's best for their kids. So how do we do the work to ensure that people are getting what they need when they need it? And if we don't deconstruct the language, we don't continue to teach. I saw in the chat, we're still teaching what equity and equality is. If we're not teaching what that means and help people understand what that means in their world, then what happens is we have what we have. The narrative that's been created creates a falsehood. And unfortunately, it is now interfering with literally us supporting the kids we say in public education we champion the most, with our babies. And that's a hard pill to swallow as an educator, where I don't know if there's any educators that signed up to do this work and didn't say it's because of I love kids. Right. And that's the part we have to be bold and courageous. And I just appreciate ACSA still holding that space while also recognizing this is hard, right? It's a hard scenario right now that we're in, but we're going to get through it. And I think those champions, as long as we have that space, those networks, and creating safe space for people to engage in this work and understand how to do so in a way that continues to preserve our core values, we're going to get through this. But I know there's some things to consider, and definitely the partnerships with other associations is going to be important. We have our I call them our brothers and sisters over at CSBA who support our school board members. School board members are getting beat up, right? And they've been getting beat up for a couple of years now. Who supports them, right? And then who's supporting our superintendents to make sure that our school boards and superintendents can work together as governance teams to really push policy and monitor policy, implement policy, and stick to it even when someone comes to that podium and is pushing back, right? This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. And I love you had my friend Toby Scruggs Hussein on to help walk us through that, because we need more of that work. Like, we're struggling right now. And I just, really commend us on, and in particular, ACSA, to just staying in this space.
Well, we said we were doubling down on our equity work. Right.
Yes,
and again, the ability to have the show, the ability to have Anthony and I on staff, the fact that we are still upfront and bold in our work is a huge signal to that. I want to ask you something. Did you get love letters too, Nicole?
Oh no. Well, let me tell a little joke here for you. So, I'm glad that you shared that with me, because what it tells me is that you're doing the work. And I'm going to say, this is what this means. Interrupting systems creates pushback. Let's be clear. If everybody was comfortable, we wouldn't get hate mail like that. Right. Now, I'm going to joke and say, at least you have some hate mail. I recall there was a time when, talk about awareness, we didn't even have a newsletter to give out to people to say this is what equity is. And then shout out to Naj and a communications team. We worked to create that, right? And we had an equity corner, and we were highlighting people's, articles. And now we're continuing to do it. But remember, when you're speaking truth and it doesn't always resonate with everybody, and it creates the pushback. You're interrupting, and people are uncomfortable. And so I think that, I think it's how do we respond to, that type of love language that people are sharing, and still remain in a space to meet people where they are. But also, I'm going to say this. I remember having a really great conversation with an amazing, shout out to Edgar Zazueta, the executive director of ACSA. I came in under Wes Smith, Dr. Wes Smith. And I remember a conversation about people are not going to like this work. And I know Wes got some calls, right? I know there were some things that I may have made people feel uncomfortable about. And some of it was, I've got to mature over time, but also it's just We were interrupting the system. We were doing something ACSA had never done. And I vividly remember him saying, you know, we're going to continue to do this work and we might lose some members over this, right? We might. But if people aren't about this work, then this is not the place for them. And that's not the best language to necessarily say to people directly, right? So I want to say that very clearly, because we love our ACSA, and we know ACSA is what it is because of members, but we also have to recognize everybody is not always going to be on the same page, and we have to find strategic ways to meet people where they are. When I got language like that, love language, I think I got a few messages at times. I picked up the phone and I called. I leaned into it. Everybody's strategy is different. Some will say, I'm just gonna, throw it in the trash, or I'm not gonna deal with it. But I will say that sometimes leaning in and asking people questions, right? I'm trying to help understand, well, what is the challenge? Tell me more, versus us becoming more divisive and combative, or not talking to each other, which is also not a way to strategically lead equity work. We have to remember equity work is about discomfort. There's nothing easy about this, like at all. It never was designed to be. And if it was, our ancestors who are looking down on us and expecting us to continue to stand on their shoulders, right? If it was easy, then we wouldn't have to stand on their shoulders, right? Literally, this is not easy. And so I think we have a calling, we have an expectation, but sometimes that's a badge of honor, Dr. Noriega, to get something like that.
I would love to have a conversation with this member that took some time to thank you for reading my article on ethnic studies, still the right thing to do, and talk about like alignment to budget. I would love to, because I have received a few letters similar. I mean, a handful, but other people have signed it. This particular member sent it through their school envelope. A waste of public dollars, but I'd love to interact.
Absolutely.
But the person didn't sign their name. So moving forward, I'm always open to a conversation.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be in this position if I was not.
Absolutely.
So I look forward to more of the work moving forward. And I think that's definitely what our members want to hear, Nicole. So I
hope you stay encouraged. I didn't mean to cut you, but I hope you stay encouraged on that.
Absolutely.
I wanted to give the shout out about the work you have done to hold space for ethnic studies. And I think, again, it goes back to awareness, right? People have a narrative. So there's an assumption of what it is or what it isn't. And I just want to say, and just to defend people for 30 seconds who push back on ethnic studies, what I truly believe is people don't know their own story yet. And when they start to unpack their own story, which is the essence of being a great leader, you got to know who you are first before you can try to lead others. I think the flight attendants say, put your mask on you first before you help assist others. But I will say, again, to defend folks for 30 seconds only, is as I've gone through my own journey to learn who my ancestors are. And I look at my DNA, like I've actually done the ancestry.com thing, right? And I always say people have to be ready for that. But literally, when I look at my family tree and I see the different ethnic groups that make up who Nicole Anderson is, and when I see the skin tones, right, that are from fair skin to myself all the way to my grandfather's very dark skin and all in between, and I look at our ancestry, like if you don't know ethnic studies, you are ethnic studies, right? Like your ancestry is not one ethnicity. It's not one culture. It's not one race. You are so much more than that. And I think when people don't know their story and don't get to see, hey, my ancestor looks like this, like literally, we don't see that we have more in common than not. And so unfortunately, that narrative has been filled in with other narratives that create hate. And it's like, wait, you're my ancestor. And until we can break those barriers down, I think those are the things that create continuous pushback. And so I think ethnic studies is a powerful space to begin, right? Because some people don't realize, like, this is deep work, but you got to start somewhere. And if you can't learn about your own story and other people's stories, I'm not sure how you can be a great leader. And again, you don't have to agree with everyone's story. You don't have to always understand, but we have to be open to listening and learning from others. And I've had that experience. It's made me grow as a leader. It's made me look at people who can treat me a certain way because I know there's some bias. I know there's some things going on. There's baggage they have. I can still push forward and still love through that and still lead and still reach out and be able to do the work that we do. And I think people need a space to know how to do that. And so that's why I said I defend them just for a moment, but also we have work to do, right? Because at the end of the day, the right thing to do is to ensure that people can learn about themselves and others in order for us to be what we would call culturally proficient people, which makes us a whole different space for educating kids than we would if we stay in the space of a single narrative, single stories, right?
Right.
Well, Nicole, I think you're going to have to defend me next because I'm I have to wrap us up. We are at time. But this happens every time. You know, this was such a great conversation, but very important stuff. Very, very important stuff. Nicole, I appreciate you so much for all of the foundation that you laid and continue to lay. I appreciate you for being so thoughtful and mindful to have your son apply to dear old Morehouse. He is going to be a great.
Yes, I learned that.
But thank you for all of the support and the work that you do outside of ACSA to bring back into ACSA. We appreciate your partnership and everything that you do. And I hope that you get some good food in Atlanta because there's a lot of great food to
already
be
done. Yeah, already done. Now, I appreciate y'all having us here and just being a great partner. You know, even leaving ACSA as a staff member, it's always been like a special space. And thank you for keeping me as one of the members. And as a consultant, you know, we continue to do the work, as Dr. Noriega said, you know, we're continuing. And so, you know, shout out to, you know, the work that's coming up. We are excited to host the Impactful Principals Network, which is a huge space. These are the same folks who are going to be superintendents in the next 5 to 7 years. So definitely want to make sure folks can have an opportunity to continue to engage. Obviously, ACSA is a great space, you know, to continue to get professional learning. But we also have some networks out there focused on impactful principals. And we do hope that folks will get registered pretty quickly before spots fill up. And there's at least 5 locations around our state, 2 in Southern Cal, Riverside and San Bernardino County, and of course, Sacramento, San Jose, and San Francisco. And so thank you again for partnering with us to continue to support administrators who are ACSA members and beyond. And just thanks for letting me just join the space. I appreciate both of you for continuing the work. And you know, I'm always here for you, always have love for you. And so just again, I'm just honored to be asked to be part of the amazing show. Season 2, episode 1, appreciate it. And just thank you again, ACSA family, for joining.
Thank you, Nicole. Have fun out there.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. So we went a little long, but that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here really soon. But I do want to mention just really quick, Dr. Noriega mentioned that we do have our Equity Administrators Academy. We're not sitting at a good number right now, honestly. So if you know someone who should be a part of that, who wants to know more information, please have them reach out to us or Dr. Sharina Betters. No matter what the issue is, we want to get people into that academy. So again, support us if you support the work, if you love children, because that's what Nicole said. It's not about the words. It's not about the titles. It's about the babies. If you really got into this work to serve all children, help us to get people into that academy. Dr. Noriega, did you have anything else to share?
I think there's a number of implications for us moving forward, right? There's still, as Nicole said, there's still a lot of work to do, but I just want to reiterate that here at ACSA, we're here for you. So if you are an ACSA member, thank you so much. If you are not an ACSA member, we'd love to, you know, support you in any way that we can. And we're also excited for the rest of the season. So just a preview, because we actually figured out some topics before the show. On our next one is actually going to be about ethnic studies. So it's actually pretty timely. We're going to talk about, you know, breaking it down a little bit about what ethnic studies is, why there's so much pushback, and why it's still, you know, it's the right thing to do, like I said in my article. And then on September 11th, we'll have Lester Powell on, who's here today in the chat. Join us, along with Pat Hansen Schmidt. So two principals who are going to dialogue with us about implications for the Mahmoud versus Taylor case, which was about religious opt-outs. So looking forward to the next few episodes with you, Anthony.
Yep. Absolutely looking forward to that. We got to go. So thank you for everyone who is watching either live or you're watching this recording. We will see you all back here in the classroom on August 28th. In the meantime, we send you love and peace.
Peace.